Hello everybody, Banana Bread Man here, and I'm joined by my former Jeopardy opponent, Lytro Storm.
Yo, hello everybody, this is semi-retired YouTuber Lytro Storm here, and I'm here to make this video peak, so let's go.
This whole idea started out as a joke, but then we noticed something strange. The villains actually collected 10 pieces during Evil Dread. Now, we could have just had them have the win, but that's a little boring, and someone's already doing that. So let's look at, what if Lightning found the immunity idol? Obviously, episode 1 will have 0 changes, so let's start with the Evil Dread. The episode will remain identical until this confessional where Lightning throws up. He notices something strange in his vomit. It's the invincibility idol. He questions how that got in there before we get a small montage. A snake eats an egg, a bird eats the snake, a shark eats the bird, and the shark burps up the immunity idol. Then the immunity idol is eaten by a fish that Lightning eats. The episode continues the same way up until the elimination ceremony where Lightning is eliminated. Joe is smug at first until he pulls out the immunity idol. Everyone is shocked to see it used this early, including Chris, who asks how he managed to get into the fun zone this early. Lightning is confused at what this could mean. Joe is dragged to the flush of shame, and Scott gets a confessional where he says something along the lines of, "So the meathead grew a brain. Guess this means I gotta get back at him for lying about the immunity idol." Sam is still exiled to Boney Island. In Saving Private Leach Ball with Joe gone, only Alejandro and Heather are fighting for Gwen's support. Since Gwen's still here, they'll still take the alternate path. Courtney and Sam still stay in the cave, and with Joe gone, Scott would initially take the cannon, like in Cannon, before accidentally shooting the boom operator, where they decide to ditch the cannon because they're too slow with it. Alejandro is shot by Zoe while he and Heather argue about who should go with Gwen. However, since Joe isn't there, Scott is not taken out by friendly fire, letting the villains get to Mike before he can shoot Heather. Scott goes after Zoe, Heather and Lightning go as a pair, and Gwen and Duncan go as a pair. Sierra still takes herself out, and Duncan still takes the shot for Gwen. Gwen gets Cameron before running into Lightning and Heather. Heather talks about voting out Alejandro the next chance they get. Gwen brushes her off, and Lightning is not worried at all. We follow as Scott finds Courtney and Sam in the cave thanks to Sam's smell of sweat and bacon. It plays out similar to Joe's encounter, with Courtney using Sam as a shield. We'll also say that Scott takes out Courtney before Zoe shows up. Zoe still does the Matrix thing and takes out Scott. She leaves the cave to find Gwen, Heather, and Lightning all waiting for her. She's taken out, letting the villains win the challenge. In an almost unanimous vote, Courtney is eliminated. Duncan isn't swapped right away, but Chris will tease him for being nice. No one volunteers for Boney Island, so Alejandro is voluntold by his team for being the first one eliminated. Food Fright will stay surprisingly similar. I don't see Lightning's addition, Courtney's removal, or Duncan being on the villains affecting the end result of the challenge. Mal will still do Mal stuff, and the heroes will still win at first before it's revealed that Sam threw. Ultimately, Sam's elimination is a canon event. In terms of little details, I imagine that Gwen will be bummed out about Courtney's elimination. Duncan will likely try to console her, but ultimately it'll probably just piss her off even more. And Lightning will do great during the obstacle course part of the challenge, but he still will likely throw up. Both Alejandro and Heather volunteer Duncan to be sent to Boney Island so they can both try to work on Gwen. Moon Madness starts off similar. Zoe sees Mal trip Cameron. Sierra is still freaking out. Mal is brought back. Heather plays nice. Mal separates Cameron from the rest of the group before tripping him, leaving him to Sierra, and Gwen separates from the rest. The first major change of this episode is that Duncan will tag along with Gwen instead. Lightning will likely run over the bridge first because Scott doesn't feel like he needs to impress Courtney. The beaver still attacks Lightning and chews off half the bridge, and the villains still have to go across it. Scott then sabotages the other half of the bridge so the heroes can't use it to cross. Duncan and Gwen go the way Gwen went in Cannon, and Sierra, Cameron, Mal, and Zoe still swing across the pit. Since Gwen doesn't have to save Courtney from the dough, the villains win a bit quicker than they did in Cannon. At the elimination ceremony, Duncan and Gwen won't break up since Courtney isn't here for Duncan to obsess over. Cameron still volunteers for elimination when Chris reveals the twist that tonight's loser will be swapping with Duncan. Duncan is shocked, and Chris says that he was going to swap him with Courtney in episode 3, but since she was eliminated, it didn't feel right. Duncan's bummed out and says bye to Gwen. Heather and Alejandro both realize that trying to get Gwen's vote at this point wouldn't be worth it since Duncan's gone. No one expects the Spanish opposition was a bit of a scramble to write. Despite the numbers advantage, this won't be over easily for the villains. Sure, the addition of Lightning doesn't make them crack, but he won't single-handedly bring the win. Heather isn't going to find the immunity idol since it's already been used, and Alejandro won't be able to poach it. However, the heroes will still win since Zoe and Mike are here to grab the massive stash of eggs. Without the idol in play, Heather is able to get the votes to make Alejandro fly the coop. Alejandro stands up, shocking everyone, and bids Heather farewell, before she cracks a couple jokes at his expense. Zoe still gets her prize, and Mal is now in total control of Mike's head. Mal goes to Boney Island, and Duncan finally remembers how he knows Mal. Anyways, I've been yapping for quite a while. It's time for Lytro to take the stage.
Now it's time for the final pre-merge challenge, Suckers Punched. To start, Duncan tells Zoe about Mal and his time in juvie, but Zoe will refuse to believe him until her elimination. She does receive the bonus point from winning the last challenge, and she doesn't have to compete in this one as well. Scott and Sierra's matches go the same, with neither scoring. Lightning goes after them and has to face his father, since living up to his legacy was shown to be very important to him last season. He gets beat at first, but eventually is able to turn the tide and get the upper hand and score the villain's first point. Mal and Cameron's fights go the same, with Mal scoring the hero's second point. Duncan has to fight the bird and can't bring himself to do it, and since Duncan and Gwen are still dating here, she says something about that moment being sweet. Gwen goes next for the villains and has to fight Courtney, and due to the fact they haven't had the chance to make up yet, Courtney doesn't hold back and she just beats Gwen. The final person left is Heather, and she has to fight the sumo wrestler from season 1, but I think it'd be cool if Chris jokes that the wrestler switched to boxing after she embarrassed him. However, I think Heather would be able to riff on him enough to make him stumble off the ring, which puts our teams at a tie. There isn't a tiebreaker in canon, but a regular boxing match between each team seems fair. The villains put up Lightning as their nomination, and Duncan volunteers for the heroes as a form of redemption for his prior defeat. But against Lightning, he does not win. This episode had the added twist of the winners being able to choose who gets flushed from the other team, and the losers picking who goes to Boney Island. Gwen and Cameron want Sierra gone, Lightning and Scott want Zoe gone, and Heather is caught somewhere in the middle. But I think she would end up booting Zoe since she doesn't want to deal with a 3-person alliance in the merge. Mal is thrilled about Zoe's elimination, but doesn't let it show. At the same time, the heroes send Lightning to Boney Island, since Zoe and Sierra hate him for what he did to Cameron last season. Mal also acts like he hates him for the same reason, and Duncan is a bit embarrassed. The next challenge is the Regatta with the merge, and Lightning gets the red speedboat, Duncan the purple, and Mike gets the boat of losers, sabotaging the rest. That leaves Cameron, Sierra, Scott, and Heather on the raft. Most of the challenge will stay the same with one major exception. Since Duncan and Gwen are still together, he won't blow up Chris's cottage. Lightning's boat stalls out before Coconut Alley, Duncan's boat gets blown up by Chef, and Lightning's boat starts working again and splashes Sierra, Cameron, Scott, and Heather. After this, Cameron gets the idea to use Scott as their motor. Lightning and the raft gang pass Duncan while Mal holds the lead. Since Zoe isn't here, Mike doesn't come out, but even still, Lightning's boat is much faster than the boat of losers. Duncan should be able to get the boat up and running faster than Courtney, as he has worked with cars in the past. Sadly, Lightning's boat stalls out at the finish line, and Duncan passed the raft and Mal. However, Lightning will probably just paddle his boat across the finish line instead of waiting for it to stop stalling. When given the offer, Lightning would probably bring no one to the cottage, and I don't see Mal asking Lightning to team up like he did with Alejandro. The immunity doesn't really matter though, for two simple reasons. Duncan didn't blow up the cottage, and Mal's still here to rig the votes. In an 8-0 vote, Cameron is eliminated. Sierra is furious at this, and Mal will use it to frame one of his biggest competitors left, Heather. While Duncan is already in an alliance and Lightning and Scott are more believable due to their history with Cameron, Heather is the best competitor left on the island. In the dead of night, Mal sneaks into the girls' cabin and plants the evidence that Heather rigged the votes against Cameron. When the morning comes, Mal puts on his best Mike face and talks to Sierra about how he misses Cameron so much and how his elimination was obviously rigged. He offers to search the guy's cabin while she gets the girls. Because of this, Sierra would find the stash in Heather's bed and shows Mal, and they both agree to vote her out the next chance they get. When it's time for the challenge, Duncan, Heather, Sierra, or Lightning agree in exchange for immunity, permanent spa residence, and getting to send someone to Boney Island. Either Lightning or Sierra would suggest that Zeke went to the mines. Sierra and Mal go together, Duncan and Gwen go together, and Lightning, Scott, and Heather all go on their own. Duncan would be captured by Zeke, leaving Gwen by herself. Sierra falls down the Cameron hole, but because she weighs more than him, the root would break and Zeke would capture her. Scott went down the path he and Courtney went in canon and meets up with Mal when they both get taken. Heather and Gwen manage to find each other, and there's some fun moments where the former rivals have to work together and they bond a little. They eventually meet up with Lightning and get to the heart of Zeke's lair. Chef runs in and stops the rats, but Zeke shoots him with the meatball bazooka. Lightning runs in but also gets shot and goes down. After this, Heather says that she'll distract Zeke while Gwen grabs the bazooka, and Heather gets crushed, but Gwen manages to save the day. Because of her injuries, Heather is medically evacuated. Ultimately, Gwen ends up sending Lightning to Boney Island. In the obstacle course, Mal works on destroying the only alliance left on the island, Gwen and Duncan. He goes after Gwen since he already knows Duncan already. He talks to her about something which is honestly not important, but he makes sure Duncan is watching. When Duncan tells her about Mal, she just assumes he's being jealous and ghosts him a little. In the challenge, Lightning and Sierra take an early lead. Mal stays behind to get into Gwen's head, and Scott is just doing bad. Lightning falls back a little on the rope climbing section because he gets shocked. This allows Sierra to pull ahead while Mal sabotages the licorice rope, and Scott also falls. Duncan tries to make conversation and says something about how it was smart to have Heather get crushed by Zeke, which Gwen is offended because she didn't actually intend for that to happen. Duncan tries to backpedal but ends up making stuff worse. This final disagreement would ultimately cause them to break up. During the leech section, Sierra falls behind, allowing Mal and Lightning to catch up. It's a close round, but Lightning pulls ahead, getting the win. Votes are kind of split for this one, as Duncan and Mal would probably vote for each other. Mal could possibly get Sierra to vote Duncan, Lightning would probably vote Mal since he came in second, and Scott's a tough one, but he would probably view Duncan as bigger competition than anyone else. I don't see Gwen voting for Duncan, but she definitely doesn't vote for Mal, and I think her vote would probably go for Scott. Since Chris's cottage wasn't blown up, he isn't living in the hotel, and Gwen doesn't volunteer for Boney Island. In terms of who would go, it would probably be Scott for coming in last.
Sunday Muddy Sunday starts with Gwen chilling in the hot tub, before Lightning cannonballs in, splashing her. He tries to make conversation, but that just annoys Gwen. She leaves in a huff, finding the camera room and a strange DVD labeled Mal's Greatest Hits. She thinks back to what Duncan said about Mike and realized this must have been what he meant. She watches Mal broke Cam's glasses, Sam's game guy, and Sierra's phone. She saw him rig the votes against Cameron, and she realized that Mal was intentionally trying to break her and Duncan up. She holds on to the DVD, realizing what she could do with it later. Scott gets to the top of the mountain first before almost falling off, allowing Lightning, Mal, and Gwen to take the lead. Sierra is quickly behind all three, with Scott and last climbing back up. When he does get back to the top, he's attacked by the hairless bear. Lightning is the first of the cherries before he gets attacked by Snappy. Mal then foot dives Snappy. Lightning thanks him for the assist before Mal dunks him in the water. Gwen and Sierra pull up in third and fourth respectively, followed by Scott, who gets free from the bear using Snappy. Mal is the first to get to the crushed nut zone, getting him attacked by the drama machine. When Lightning arrives, Mal gets the robot to go after him. Lightning leaves as Gwen and Sierra both arrive while avoiding the robot. Gwen tells Sierra about the DVD, and she doesn't believe Gwen, but Gwen says she could show her the DVD after the challenge. Sierra is at least willing to hear her out. Mal and Lightning are now neck and neck for the chocolate fudge area, with Gwen hot on their trail. The plan attacks Mal, letting Lightning and Gwen pull ahead. Scott arrives at the nut area and spills the nuts on his sundae before the drama machine pummels him. Mal sabotages the fudge for Sierra and Scott. Scott is impressed. Scott and Sierra put dirt on their sundaes. Lightning arrives in first, followed by Gwen, Mal, Scott, and Sierra. But surprise, it's an eating challenge. Sierra comes in first, then Scott, Mal, Lightning, and last is Gwen. With Sierra at the spa hotel, Gwen shows her the tape. Sierra is stunned at first but agrees to vote for Mal. They then work on getting a third vote. They immediately gravitate towards Scott, since Sierra hates Lightning for what he did to Cameron last season, and Gwen doesn't like him from their time in the spa hotel. Scott sees the tape, and he doesn't really care, but he agrees to vote for Mal if they vote out Lightning first. They're confused at first, but since Scott explains that Lightning has won over half the merge challenges, they might not get another chance to get rid of him. There is a little pushback at first, but neither Gwen nor Sierra care enough about Lightning to save him. Lightning is eliminated in a 4-1 vote and is left flabbergasted. In the bold and the bootyful, nothing of interest will happen before the challenge, but since everyone knows what's going on at this point, Mal drops his act an episode early. Scott, Gwen, and Mal get the same treasure as in canon, and Sierra gets Zoe's treasure. Since the cottage isn't destroyed, Chris's mansion is just guarded by Chef. Scott still has his Looney Tunes as shenanigans with Fang, Gwen and Mal both still head to the cottage, and while Sierra isn't as broken as All-Stars Zoe, she's still enough of a freak to remember where the Yeti hung out in Total Drama Island. Gwen and Mal both break into the mansion. Gwen quickly finds a painting, but Mal trips her, causing the painting to break. Chef hears the commotion and runs over. Mal does that stupid wrist crush thing on Chef, getting him to reveal that the statue isn't here. Gwen uses this distraction to sneak off and find another painting. We then cut to Sierra finding the Yeti cooking its eggs. She steals them before we cut back to Scott. Scott is still doing terrible when Mal shows up. He offers to help him in exchange for taking him to the finale. We cut back to Gwen finding a painting on the wall. She pulls it off before an alarm sounds and Chef sprints over to her location. We then follow as Sierra leads the Yeti to the dock. Gwen is sprinting towards the dock, followed closely behind by Chef. Eventually, Gwen and Chef converge with Sierra and the Yeti, leading to a mad dash for first. Gwen will briefly pull ahead before Sierra chucks an egg at her, making her fall over. Sierra will come in first, with Gwen and her mostly untouched painting in second. Chris announces that Sierra and Gwen have both arrived with their treasure. Mal will hear this and realizes that if he helps Scott, that he's done for, so he bashes him over the head with a stick, knocking him out. He pulls up and says that since he couldn't get his item, he brought Chris the next best thing, an injured contestant. Chris says it's better than what Scott brought, which is nothing. Scott comes in last and as such is auto-eliminated. It's now down to who Sierra wants to face in the finale, and she'd pretty obviously want to go against Gwen. Gwen is both weaker and she wants to guarantee her revenge on Mal. Mal crashes out until he is flushed. And finally, the finale. The finale is a little awkward because while neither of the competitors like each other that much, they don't really hate each other either. Sure, Sierra might still hold a little animosity from Cody's crush, but that's mostly mitigated by Gwen helping her avenge Cameron. When it comes time to shoot down their helpers, Sierra uses the paintball gun and gets Cameron and Mal, and Gwen uses the leech gun to shoot down Heather and Duncan. And everyone else is sent into the sun. Since Zoe isn't here, no one believes that Mike is still there. At the first part of the challenge, Duncan and Heather find a log that Gwen can use to row over, while Sierra pole vaults over while carrying Cameron. We get some dialogue between Duncan and Heather, establishing that she and Alejandro started dating in the Arctic. Sierra and Cameron also talk, where Sierra apologizes for treating him like Cody, and Cameron accepts this apology. Chris walks up to Mal and asks why he's not helping, or at least stopping one of them from winning. Mal thinks about it for a second and decides that hurting Cameron could be a little fun. We cut to the inside of Mike's mind and see the rest of his personalities walking up the steps of the tower. Sierra and Gwen both arrive on top of the lava around the same-ish time, with Duncan, Heather, and Cameron close behind. Mal pole vaults over, climbs the layer, and throws Cameron into Heather, knocking them both off as Gwen, Duncan, and Sierra cross the other side of the moat. Sierra offers to come back down, but Cameron tells her to keep going. Mal finds a conveniently placed pogo stick in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 Foxy jump scares onto Duncan. He starts wrestling Duncan in the water. Duncan yells at Gwen to keep moving. Sierra and Gwen then both make it to the top at the same time and duck for cover from Chef's Meatball Bazooka. They're both waiting for the other to make the first move. Eventually, Mal comes up and tackles Gwen like Pharaoh Zeke. Sierra uses this time to try to make a move, but gets shot by the meatball bazooka. After Mal yaps her a bit how this is all Gwen's fault, Duncan shoulder bashes Mal off of her. Mal hits his head and we peek back into his mind. All the Mike stuff happens, reset button and all, and Duncan helps Gwen up as Sierra frees herself. The alternate endings are decided by whether Chef shoots Duncan, allowing Gwen to win, or Gwen allowing Sierra to pull it off. If Gwen wins, Duncan and Heather congratulate her, while Sierra is consoled by Cameron. If Sierra wins, Cameron congratulates her, while Duncan consoles Gwen. In both outcomes, Mike returns and Cameron is thrilled. Gwen then apologizes to Duncan for letting Mal break them up, and the island sinks, leading to another season. And that's What If Lightning Found the Immunity Idol. Thank you all so much for watching, and incredible thanks to Lytro Storm for joining me today. Link to his channel is in the description. I hope you all enjoyed. If you noticed any problems, please let me know. Leave a comment about what I should do next, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.